Hey everyone, it's Dr. Python JavaScript, and we're going to go ahead and review a little bit about Axios. It's such a great HTTP request library. I think everyone should be using it at this point if you are using Node.js. But anyways, let's go ahead and break it down. So Axios is a modern promise-based HTTP client library. This means that Axios is used to send an HTTP request and handle their responses, all using JavaScript's promises. And I know you guys have seen promises before, but it's already built in there. Axios supports both Node.js and JavaScript in the browser, right? That's great because Fetch, the native JavaScript built-in method for HTTP requests, actually doesn't really work in Node. You'd have to install Node-Fetch. So that's something important to realize. Now, it's obviously free and open source, but here's something important. It comes with built in with some web security by protecting users against attacks such as CSRF. This is a common attack, and that's why a lot of people don't like using JavaScript, because it's easy sometimes to go ahead and manipulate some of the data, with some malicious attacks. But this comes with a built-in security measure. Like, what more can you ask for? Axios is the one. So over here, as a result of its features and ease of use, it's become a popular choice for JavaScript developers when making HTTP calls. Let's get started by setting up Axios. So here they're just creating a folder called Axios tutorial. They're going to cd into that folder, and then they're going to actually npm init it, right? Now, a lot of people want to know, should we npm init or should we install a package first? Now, what I usually do, honestly, I'm just going to be honest with you, is I usually install the package within the folder and then I run npm init, because then it'll give me a JSON file with my dependencies. Another thing is, since version 5, we don't really need to write --save. Most files automatically get saved as a dependency. So that's important to know. Here's for the TypeScript users. This tutorial uses Node.js with CommonJS to load our tutorials. So that may be a little bit different from the ES modules, but shouldn't see anything tremendously different. CommonJS is a standard for loading modules. In particular, it specifies the require keyword to do so. The example should be working regardless of the platforms without any change. Great. So again, they went ahead and ran npm init, and then they went ahead and saved or installed Axios, and then also saved it as a dependency. So if you looked in your JSON package, you see it there. Now this is really important, right? Writing asynchronous request with Axios, which means non-blocking. In Node.js, input and output activities like network requests are done asynchronously. As Axios uses promise to make network requests, callbacks are not an option when using this library. So do you guys understand that? Input and output activities like network requests are done asynchronously. All right, so everyone knows that, right? However, Axios is using promises to make its network request, which means there's going to be an implicit sort of callback in there that's going to expect it to be resolved. Callbacks, again, are not an option when using this library, so you can't not have a callback in a sense, right? You have to have a callback because it's built in. We interact with Axios using promises or the async/await keywords, which are also an alternative syntax for using promises. So this is interesting. Async and await keywords, which is an alternative syntax for using promises. But Axios is using these promises to build this sort of request. So what you want to think is Axios going to use the async await? It absolutely is. So here they show us how to import it. Pretty obvious. And here they use how to import it like a boss. Go ahead and put that default. We recommend you use the second method as auto-completion, and seeing code documentation in your IDE can make the development process easier. When the library is imported, we can start making HTTP requests. Excellent. So here they teach you how to send a GET request. All right. And when you read pages like this, you take it and you literally store it in a folder. Because why are you going to go look for a resource like this when you have an interview that wants you to, specifically go back to this type of skill set? So great. We make an HTTP request to an external API that sends us a list of blog posts, right? Upon receiving the data, we'll log its contents to the console. If we encounter an error, we'll log that too. Let's see how to make one using the default promise syntax. In a new file called getRequestPromise.js, add the following code. Now here, they don't have the async await, but this is still a promise structure because you have axios.get, you've got the URL, and then you've got a promise.then, and it's going to look for the response. What are we going to do with the response? Simply console.log response.data. Now, you can say data or data. Depends on how you say it. Tomato, tomato, right? Now, data is interesting because fetch uses body, right? It uses the body object. Response is going to use the data object. And that's how you're going to access the actual, content within your response. Another thing is we don't have to transform this or convert it, with the JSON, parentheses. We don't have to do that. This is already going to be converted in a way that we can use it in JavaScript, right? So a lot of times you have to JSON.stringify and things like that. Not absolutely necessary with Axios because the JSON transformation is happening immediately. So that's cool, which is why you see less syntax than you would with the typical fetch request. Okay, so here they're explaining it. To make a GET request, we pass the URL. All right, that's the argument. Great. Axios.get method. If you run this code with Node, and then you're just going to run the name of the file, you'll see this output. So you're going to see an array with an ID, a title, a body, and that's just the first element. Second element, another object with an ID of one, user ID of 1, an ID of 2, title, body, and probably so on, right? Now, let's rewrite the same code using async await keywords. I love this because this is something I wanted to do, right? I love doing it in the front end with React, but to do it on the back end, let's see how they're doing it here. So again, they're just gonna sort of require the module. Excellent. Now, this is key. They're going to create a variable, and that variable, as of right now, is being called set or send get request. Cool. Now they have async and an anonymous function. Can you believe that? Anonymous function. And within that anonymous function, within the body of that anonymous function, we have a try catch block. Such beautiful code. And this is actually very, if not exactly the same as what we would do with Axios, but we're doing it now on the server side in a Node.js runtime environment. So we've got a function, right? Actually, we've got a variable. So we create a variable, and then we're going to assign an asynchronous anonymous function, right? Arrow function, whatever you want to call it. And I'm writing this down as I'm speaking with you. The reason why I'm not editing this is because I want you guys to see how I learn, so you guys can get down and jiggy just like me. So, great. We've got async, which we've assigned to the variable. Within the body of async, right? That's important. Body of anonymous function, right? Will have a try catch block. Okay. Now the try, we're going to create a variable. So we'll create a response variable. Assign, this is my favorite part. So we're going to assign a weight and then the Axios request. So in this case, Axios.get, it could have been post, whatever, right? So we're assigning the await Axios request, right? And then basically another thing that's interesting is within the try block, you no longer have to use then. I could just tell the try block what I want to do with the function, right? So I get, we'll say end statement, and I'll say within try block we can give instructions without using then .then method, right? Catch block. Don't ever forget about the catch block. So the catch block is actually going to have a parameter, an argument. So we're going to have an arg, and we call that error. The body of the catch block will console.log error. And then we'll close function, right? So we'll close. Yeah, because this is all within anonymous function. So close anonymous function. I love this. And I was wondering how to do this for a while on the back end, but it literally is the same. Other than on the front end, I'd use effect. In this case, not so. So let's see how they explain it. We use async await syntax. We need to wrap the Axios.get and this function call with an asynchronous function. Okay. And what they mean by that is pretty much they're wrapping this, right, with this function. This anonymous function is asynchronous. Remember that the variable is not asynchronous. It's the anonymous function that's asynchronous. And await is going to come right before the actual Axios request, even though right before that we declare a variable. Okay. Now that variable, since this immediately returns a promise, imagine this right here was the, response, pretty much the response that we were first logging in that first then, and then we'd have to use then again in order to get the response.data. But no, in this situation, this is going to store that first response, and then we can actually have access to the data object with, or property if you want to call it, but it's really an object because it has a whole bunch of other properties within it. We can have access to the data object within this variable we created, which is so cool. And then here, we're just going to throw that error like I explained. So that's pretty much the ins and outs of a asynchronous function, particularly with Axios. This is amazing. It's very useful. And if you have any questions, go ahead and forward me some. I'm going to go ahead and show a demo in my next video. So stay tuned, subscribe, and watch that.